The Cincinnati Bengals escape New York with a win. It wasn't pretty, but they got the job done. Let's break it down.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. We've got a victory to talk about for the Cincinnati Bengals, and I'm Jake Liscow, joined as always by James Rapien, your host of the Locked On Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. If you're new to the show and you're tuning in because the Bengals won a game for the first time in a little bit, I guess it's only been a couple weeks, well, you can hit the subscribe button if you want to stay up to date on all things Cincinnati Bengals this year. Welcome back to the everydayers. Welcome back to those of you who make us your first listen. We appreciate the regulars so very much for enabling us to do this show every day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. You can go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. It was a 2-score win for the Cincinnati Bengals. The final score 17-7 in New York. The Bengals historically, even with Joe Burrow at quarterback, not great in road primetime situations. And it was uglier than we would have wanted it to be, James, I would say. I think we probably are in agreement there, but we haven't talked about this game at all yet. So what were your takeaways? What are your thoughts after the Bengals win with the help of a nice bounce out of bounds on a Chase Brown fumble late in the game? But outside of that, they finished. What were your big takeaways for this one?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. They needed to win. And so it doesn't matter if it was 70-7, 500-7, or 8-7. It only counts as one. And regardless of how they did it tonight, guess what we would be saying on Monday? Guess what it would? Oh, well, they're still 2-4. So that's where I start. You had to win tonight. And was Joe his best? No, he said that. Was it a tough matchup because of the front they're playing against? Of course. Did we think that they were going to score more, be a little prettier on offense? I'm sure, but it wasn't. And so I do think that these type of wins can help as a team navigates through whatever the Bengals are navigating through, because they had to rely on their defense. They had to rely on their special teams. They had to rely on DJ Turner and BJ Hill and Trey Hendrickson and all of these guys that stepped up in key moments. And yeah, there's a very real scenario where it goes the other way tonight, where it flips, where the Giants tie the game 10-10 on a field goal, and then the pressure's on and the vibes are different, or maybe take the lead because they passed on a second field goal there, and then they missed a second field goal, but they passed on one on that fourth down that DJ Turner makes a big play. So these games flip. We've seen it week in and week out. And so for the Bengals to close it out, even though Joe's not necessarily playing his best, his words, not mine, even though they let the Giants hang around all game long and didn't necessarily need to, and punted 5 straight times. Last week they scored touchdowns on 4 straight drives against the Ravens. This week they scored a touchdown on the opening possession, and then they punt 5 straight times. And on that 6th possession, guess what? It was a fumble. So it was ugly. But I don't care because they won. And sometimes it's okay to win ugly. And this is one of those times. They had to have it, and they got it.
I sort of agree with you. It was a game they had to win, and winning is more important than the way they won. I still have reservations, but at the same time, you're right that either way they're 2-4. I do think that I would feel a little bit differently if they had scored on 2 more drives than they did. They really struggled to move the ball consistently against this Giants defense. They couldn't run the ball in this game, besides Joe Burrow, who led the team in rushing with the nearly 20-mile-per-hour touchdown run on 3rd and 18, which was a real turning point in the game on the very first drive of the game, where you go from a 3rd and 18 disaster mode after you opt to receive after winning the coin toss, which was a decision that I questioned. It didn't turn out to matter. And they get the touchdown there because Joe Burrow makes an awesome play on an easy read on an insane defensive play call from the Giants to play man there on 3rd and 18. Like, actually nuts to go man blitz on 3rd and 18 against Joe Burrow. And they were punished rightfully for it. But with the way the offense played, it's a step in the right direction. They needed the win. I agree with all of those things, but I could be feeling better after the win. Let's just put it that way. The amount of plays they didn't make is very akin to previous weeks, except the Giants didn't capitalize. And that matters. We're talking about it differently if they lose the game, obviously, than if they win the game. Just like the last few weeks, we're talking about the Baltimore game, the Kansas City game, the Washington game. We're talking about all those games very differently. The Patriots game, if they managed to make the extra play and win the game, and they did that in this game. But in many ways, it was still very reminiscent of the way they've played throughout the season. And so while they made the plays to win the game, especially on defense, and I want to shout out BJ Hill significantly and Trey Hendrickson for his ability to close and DJ Turner to bounce back and make that play. You know, these plays you talked about, Mike Hilton making really nice plays in the run game. Those things matter and winning matters. But I could be feeling better about the win. Let's just say that after the way the game went.
Yeah, they're flawed. And so that's why I'm not worried about it. Like I knew that they were flawed coming in. And so if they won 27-7 instead, do I feel that, I just don't. It's the best they could have done today was get to 2-4. And I get it. I think a lot of people are going to be on your side with this because the how does matter. Like the feeling. I've sent out a tweet. I still haven't read the messages. Out a tweet going into the fourth quarter, like, "Hey, how we feeling?" And it had like 300 replies. I can't wait to read them. But like, I get it. Like it's tense. But the bottom line is, and we're going to spend a lot of time all week, sure, that discussing what they did or didn't do. Certainly, we're going to dive into that in more detail here in a second. But the best they could have done on Sunday night was get to 2-4. They couldn't have made it up and gotten to 4-4. If Burrow had thrown for 5,000 yards and the defense had forced 5 turnovers, it would still be 2-4. And so that is a step in the right direction. To your point, it could have unraveled and gone the other way. It didn't. It could have. And so are there things they need to fix? Absolutely. It's much, much easier to fix them after flying home when you are 2-4 and not 1-5. 1-5 would have been like, all right, nail in the coffin. Let's start talking about, all right, well, the trade deadline's a few weeks away. And so they push that down at least a little bit. We don't have to have those conversations this week, Jake.
Yeah, we can avoid those for at least a bit longer, hopefully much longer, of course. What's interesting to me about it, and we can continue to discuss, why this game gives you mixed signals or mixed vibes, despite the fact that the win and the overall point. And I do agree with that largely, like I said. But you mentioned that the team is flawed, and we've known that the team is flawed for the last few weeks, obviously. And I think even if they had won one of the games coming into this game, if they had beaten Washington, if they had beaten Kansas City, or if they had beaten Baltimore, if they had won any of those games coming into this game, we would be talking about it differently. And I wouldn't be holding on to these reservations as strongly as I am. They wouldn't be so prominent in my mind if they hadn't had this recurring theme all season. But when you say they're flawed, this isn't the way we thought they were flawed. And that's where their inability to play complementary football on a week-to-week basis is what's a little frustrating. Although there are plenty of positives to talk about. And even when I think about the offensive performance in this game, which was uneven at best and disappointing, I think would be the word I would use to describe it. There's still some big positives that I come down with, despite the way things started, the way things ended. I was encouraged by a few things that I'm hoping they can build on. And that's what you have to think about, I think, for this game, for this team. You have to hope they can build on the way the offense finished, despite the Chase Brown fumble that you're all yelling at your screen about right now, and the way the defense finished and the way the defense played. And you have to hope that they can build on those things with the help they've gotten and go from there. So we'll continue to talk about these flaws, James. I want to get your take on the flaws that we saw tonight not being necessarily the flaws we have seen from this team. I don't know if you expected them, perhaps, but that is a direction we can go as we talk about the offense, defense, and special teams in this game a little bit more specifically coming up next. We know your sex life is important. Everybody knows that. Your schedule is busy. You're listening to Locked On Bengals and you don't have time to get to the doctor to get treated for ED. And through HIMS, you can get a personalized ED treatment without stepping foot outside your door. HIMS is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. It's 100% online. There's no need for those uncomfortable doctor's visits. You don't have to listen to me talk about it more than you have to. You just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option for you. And if it's prescribed, your medication will be shipped directly to you in discreet packaging for free. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products, which are not approved for or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan.
Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Constitution 101, Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, A Land of Hope, and more. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever, tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Right now, all you have to do is go to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. Again, that's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon.
James, what were your thoughts on the flaws we saw tonight compared to what we expected coming into this game?
Well, I do think it's interesting, like in the larger point of, all right, well, this offense, they take 2 steps back and the defense takes 2 steps forward, and what's going on. I still think we're both concerned about the defense in general, even though they hold the Giants to 7 points. But offensively, I think it's pretty simple. Like, really good, crazy good fronts can give this team some problems. I mean, and it's because they're a pass first team. They're not going to be this run heavy, line it up and run it. Even if they can be efficient running the ball, they're not going to be this power run team that runs it 40 times. And that's fine. But games like this are tough because if you would have told me after that touchdown run that they're going to punt it 5 straight times and then have a fumble, I would have laughed at you. I just would have. I'd have been like, no, Joe is clearly seeing the field all right. It's going to be fine. They'll score. It might be ugly, but they'll find ways to score. And they didn't. And really, outside of T and Jamar, for all of the talk, and I praise all these guys as much as anyone, there wasn't anyone else that was stepping up and making a huge play until Andre did on 3rd and 12. So it happened. But when you have these long lulls, you need someone to do something. And T had a nice catch and run up the sideline at one point when they were in the lull and kept punting and were just kind of sluggish. But it's tough. And so I think that they can build off of this more than anything, because I do think they're really talented. At the same time, is it a little concerning that they struggled so much? Sure. I didn't expect them to score 30 every single week for the end of time. But did I think that they were going to get the 20 plus tonight? Yeah, I did. And they didn't. And that's – I don't think it's alarming, but I do think it's something worth paying attention to, especially with that defensive front they were going against.
And this isn't the way football worked, but if Cordell Wilson has been called for a holding penalty, which is a debatable call, let's say.
Bad call.
They would have gotten to 21, assuming everything else happened the same exact way. But, of course, things wouldn't happen the same exact way. So it doesn't really work that way. But the run game tonight was particularly disappointing, I would say, despite their, rushing touchdowns that were or weren't in this game, and Chase Brown being pretty good. Zach Moss had a really bad game. Chase Brown nearly had a really bad game too with that fumble, but the fumble goes out of bounds instead of going to a Giants defender. But Zach Moss tonight, not even thinking about the fumble was ineffective. Looked like he was having a tough time finding the space to run the ball, and maybe that's just the Giants playing a good game of run defense. But I thought this was a game where they would be able to run the ball okay. And our guy Mike, who we'll talk to about the film for this game most likely this week, pointed out before the game this is a kind of defense that likes to send their defensive line upfield. And they've played against this defensive coordinator when he was in Tennessee several times, and he's given the Bengals a hard time. And maybe we should have paid more attention to that and that historical matchup when the Bengals have played Tennessee over the last few years. They've had issues. And it's similar where you've got a good defensive front and questionable pieces around it. And that defensive front has made things really hard. But they weren't able to run the ball like at all in this game. Their early down rushing success rate was 33%, which is pretty bad. They only had 2 late down runs, and they were both severely negative EPA per play. Like, it's obvious watching it, but those runs got blown up in key situations and were big negative plays for them. And again, you get to the fourth quarter and you're asking Joe Burrow to convert 3rd and 10, 3rd and 12. And to his credit, after taking a big hit on 3rd and 10, they adjust protection and they pick up a stunt on an island, do Orlando Brown and Cordell Volson on the left side. That was previously what led to Joe Burrow being evaluated for that concussion. But they pick it up, and Joe Burrow is able to roll out and hit Josevich to make the play. And that's what we're talking about, where they need to make the plays to finish the game. And yeah, Chase Brown fumbled, and that muddies the waters. If Chase Brown didn't fumble, we'd just be talking about how awesome they finished the game. The offense made the plays to finish the game. Chase Brown ran for the touchdown. Joe Burrow converted the 3rd down. The defense got the sack. BJ Hill had another tip pass. Or, DJ Turner getting in there on 4th down. We'd be talking about these instances where the Bengals made the play, and we wouldn't have any mud to talk about. But it is muddy, unfortunately, the way things went in this game on the offensive side of the ball, especially, where there were some awesome plays in this game for Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase. In the scramble drill from Joe Burrow to Andre Josevich. But it wasn't the consistency that we wanted to see. They didn't deal with it well early. Zach Taylor said he couldn't find the rhythm early. And when you hear Zach Taylor say that, it's usually a night that's very frustrating for us to talk about for the offense. And there was a lot of that in this game tonight.
Yeah, no doubt. And I do think when you think of all the big plays or the bigger plays, it's Burrow creating. I mean, the touchdown run created. The big play to Chase buys just a little extra time. The play to Yoshi, extra time. And think about that. That is such a weapon that he had to rely on, and that wins them the game, essentially, from an offensive standpoint. Because without that, where would they be? The structure did not work. And I think the defensive coordinator thing, I'm glad you brought that up, because clearly the Giants just had a wrench, and they were using it every single time the Bengals thought they had a good plan. I mean, seriously. And the only reason that they were able to generate offense in those big plays, explosive plays, were all 3 of those are off script. Burrow creates, Burrow making a play. And that's great. You also want some of those to be coming from what you are drawing up and for what you are putting out there on the field. So that just something of note. But at the same time, when nothing is working that you're drawing up, you want to be able to find a way to make plays still. You want to be able to escape with a road win and improve to 2-1 on the road this year. They did that. And so I come back to it. It's okay, well, yeah, things to work on, but Joe did make those plays, and they were able to make enough plays to get out of here with a win.
It's just like previous weeks, except it's the opposite side of the coin, right? They didn't make the one play last week, despite everything that went wrong. They didn't make the one play last week or the week before or whatever week. This week they did make more plays than the Giants. That's why they won the game. Shane Bowen, by the way, the defensive coordinator for the Giants, was the defensive coordinator for the Titans from 21 to 23. And of course, the Bengals have seen plenty of the Titans in that time frame and have had their issues on offense against Shane Bowen in the last few years. So something that is very obvious in hindsight, that defensive coordinator matchup, not a good one for this Bengals offense. Lou Anarumo, returning to his stomping grounds, however, did put up a much needed performance on the defensive side of the ball, especially with those guys healthy. The defense did step up in this game, James. We should give them credit, as well as we should give Ryan Rico some credit here to finish up the show coming up next.
Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy the way it should be. You can get real money with daily fantasy with PrizePicks. And by the way, they have over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. So how does it work? Well, right now, you can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. And all you do is you pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. You can run your game all season long with PrizePicks. So maybe you think next week that Joe Burrow is going to throw for more than his PrizePicks projection for passing yards, or that Jamar Chase is going to have more than his PrizePicks projection for receiving yards. You could put those together. You can mix and match different teams, different projections. And right now, you're going to get $50 instantly. All you have to do is download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, play that first $5 lineup after you download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game.
James, we need to give some credit to this defense. BJ Hill, in a revenge game, had a true revenge game. Trey Hendrickson was the closer that the Bengals needed and got the better, I would say, of a difficult matchup with Andrew Thomas. Overall, I thought the Bengals' interior defensive line looked much better this week. It wasn't perfect by any means, but against an inferior interior offensive line in the New York Giants, I thought they held up respectably. Mike Hilton was making plays. Jordan Battle was mixing in. Sam Hubbard looked better in this game. I thought Cam Taylor-Britt had a bounce-back game despite, again, a questionable DPI penalty where he may or may not have made significant enough contact with the receiver to earn that penalty. And even some young guys, McKinley Jackson, pop in a couple of times, led directly to that 4th down stop by disrupting the run play on 3rd down. But before DJ Turner's pass breakup I'm talking about, he gets in there and forces the runner to bounce in the backfield after getting some penetration, leads to a run stop there. Saw Chris Jenkins get involved as well. So some of the younger guys performing. Saw Sheldon Rankins have a beautiful pass rush win at one point in the Giants' own end zone that helps the Bengals get off the field. So a lot of guys stepping up at different times. And while there's still lots of work to do for this defense, and Daniel Jones missed a lot of open guys because Daniel Jones is bad and a bozo and threw one of the worst interceptions you'll ever see, there was a lot of good in terms of a response from this defense after a players-only meeting this week.
Well, he did get hit.
Yeah, no, BJ Hill created the interception.
Yeah.
For sure. It was just a bozo decision to try to throw the ball.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. All right. I was like, you got it.
Yeah, no, you credit BJ Hill for sure, but I mean, he's also a bozo quarterback.
Man, bozo. That's just mean.
Well, it's a pretty good word to describe Daniel Jones quarterbacking. Come on.
I'm not saying you're wrong. It's just me. Anyway.
Okay.
Trey Hill, or Trey Hill, who was active tonight, by the way. Trey Hendrickson and BJ Hill. Why would I have said Trey Hill? They would get game balls for sure. I mean, Hendrickson, you have 2 tackles for loss, 3 quarterback hits, 3 sacks, or 2 sacks, by the way. I believe that's what it is. I should have
2 sacks.
Yeah. 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss, 3 quarterback hits. And the way BJ Hill was able to just be around, I mean, is he going to have another game like that this year? 2 passes defense, 2 quarterback hits, 7 tackles. I mean, you take that all day long. Like, if you could get that production out of him, you would love it. He'd be in the Pro Bowl. And so for him to play like that, they needed it. And they obviously needed this defense to play at that level. And the thing I was most impressed with was it got away from them. It's 7-7. They kind of lose some of their momentum. The Bengals have to settle for a field goal after the bozo holding call, since we're using that word today on Cordell. And so you have to settle for a field goal. And then the Giants are driving down, and he should have made the field goal, but they hold him to 3. They don't They don't let go of the rope completely. And then you get that big fourth down stop. And it's the guy that was called for pass interference, and he hated the call. He absolutely hated the call. Whether he's right or not, I'm not going to debate that. That's whatever. But DJ Turner was not a fan of that call. And especially when you're a young player and now momentum's kind of going against your side of the ball, and think the crowd's loud and you're hearing "Let's go Giants" and it's fourth down, and then you step up and make the play of the game. I mean, just a huge play. And so I do think I don't think anyone's super worried about the offense, like big picture wise, but defensively, even with the guy that you don't like at quarterback that you think is a bozo, I do think that they can build on what they did tonight. And obviously there's a difference when you have a healthy BJ Hill with Trey Hendrickson, with Sheldon Rankins in there. And then you're bringing in McKinley Jackson, who I think had like 20 snaps. Like, you're bringing in these guys. It keeps everyone fresh. And I like it. I don't think they have a great amount of depth, obviously, but if they can just stay like this and stay healthy, I do think that this defensive front is going to be much better than we saw before week 6 and before this win over the Giants.
I mean, guys that were playing 60%, 70% of their defensive snaps were not active tonight on the defensive line in Lawrence Guy and JT Fele. So, yeah, I mean, they're healthier, and that helps. They've got their 2 rookies in there. They've got their 2 veterans in there. So it did look better tonight. The Giants aren't world beaters up front, but the defense overall had a bounce back performance that they badly needed. And holding a team to 7 points is a strong result for defense. No matter who that offense is, it's a strong result for defense that has needed a strong result. I mean, the Giants, even without Malik Neighbors last week, did put up a much better performance, I would say, against the Seattle Seahawks. In this game, averaging just 4.2 yards per play, 3.8 yards per carry. And the Bengals really came out on the bad end of penalties in this game. They had 6 penalties for 67 yards. The Giants had 2 penalties for 9 yards. So that hidden yardage stat strongly favoring the Giants in this one. But a hidden yardage stat that strongly favored the Bengals was their punting unit in this game was probably pretty instrumental in them winning the game in a sneaky and under-heralded way. They gave the Giants longer fields than they may have expected, with a few really nice punts from Ryan Rico that traveled 55-plus yards. Ryan Rico dropped 4 punts inside the 10. Tyson Anderson was excellent in punt coverage, as was the punt coverage team in general. There were 2 returns attempted on Ryan Rico's punts for a total of 1 yard. I think that's on 6 punts, if I'm remembering correctly.
6 punts. Yeah. 4 were inside the 20, 1 touchback, and Tyson Anderson, 2 special teams tackles.
The touchback had a chance to be down too. Tyson Anderson on that one could not find the ball and was looking at the return man who had called a fair catch. There was a chance that could have been down for a touchback as well. So good game for Ryan Rico in this punt team.
Yeah, he rebounded. And that's 2 weeks now in a row, 2 or 3 weeks, where the Rico Anderson tandem is really come on strong. And honestly, on every single one of those punts, it felt like 26 was streaking downfield free to make a play. And that's what you want. And he's been really good on special teams, and Rico bouncing back after last week was huge. And they needed it. Like, that's it, is the offense. I think a lot of weeks the offense is going to be able to carry the burden, carry the load. But you need some of these defensive weeks, some of these, all right, it's ugly, it doesn't feel great. Ryan, punt, boom the ball. And what a weapon he is. I mean, because he can boom it. He's long and 57, but he just punts it high too. Mm-hmm. It's pretty high punts. And that allows Tyson Anderson, and Akeem Davis-Gaither had a nice cleanup tackle as well on special teams. So, yeah, I liked what I was seeing overall from them, and obviously Ryan was the star of the show.
A little bit of luck in this game goes the Bengals' way between a fumble and 2 missed field goals for the New York Giants, but you take a win, and you take a win when your defense holds the Giants to 7 points, regardless of who the Giants are. When you can hold an NFL team to 7, That's a strong stat. I think that the TV broadcast mentioned the Bengals were 1-100 and something when they scored 10 or less points in a game. They got to 17 because Chase Brown chose to go into the end zone instead of diving at the 1. And you can't really fault him for that. I think either of those decisions would be fine. I'm not going to sit here and try to pick apart anything like that. But that was a funny stat that the broadcast mentioned right as Chase Brown was about to score this touchdown. But you take the luck sometimes, and you take the ability to make the plays down the stretch, and you take this kind of game. And not to get too far ahead of myself, because we will have another day to at least to talk about this game before we shift our attention to next week. But you might need the same kind of game next week against the Browns from a roster construction perspective, especially if they don't change their quarterback, who has been the worst in the league. Might need a similar kind of game against the Browns next week. So good to see the Bengals get a win this week, 2-1 on the road. You mentioned, James, earlier in the show, they win a road game.
Hey Jake, if Daniel Jones is a bozo, what's Deshaun Watson? Find out next on Locked On Bengals.
We don't have words we're allowed to say for that one. The Bengals also get Joe Burrow's first win over an NFC East team. Patricia Traynor from Locked On Giants pointing that stat out when we talked with her on our crossover. So that's a good one to knock off the list as well for Joe Burrow. That's going to do it, though, for this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Until next time, the Bengals are 2-4 with a win on Sunday Night Football. Hoo day, and have a good one.